In love with her 2 children first. That changed everything forever. Wind carried dust across the empty main street of Hollow Creek as the stagecoach rattled to a stop outside the general store. Sarah Mitchell gathered her worn traveling bag and looked at her 2 children with tired but determined eyes. Her daughter Emma, just 7 years old, clutched her rag doll against her chest. Her son William, barely 5, pressed his small body against his mother's side. "Is this where we're going to live, Mama?" Emma asked, her voice small and uncertain. Sarah smoothed down her daughter's tangled brown hair and forced a smile onto her cracked lips. "For now, sweetheart. Just for now." 3 weeks ago, Sarah had buried her husband Robert in a shallow grave outside of Nebraska City. The fever had taken him quickly, leaving her with 2 children, $47, and a letter from her late husband's brother, offering her work at his boarding house in Wyoming. She had no other choice. Her family in Boston had disowned her years ago, when she chose to marry a poor farmer instead of the wealthy merchant they had selected for her. The boarding house stood at the end of town, a weathered 2-story building with peeling white paint and a crooked front porch. Inside, she found her brother-in-law Harold Mitchell, a thin man with calculating eyes who looked nothing like her kind-hearted Robert. "You can cook and clean," Harold said, looking her up and down with an expression that made her skin crawl. "The children can help around the place. I'll give you a room in the attic and meals. No wages." Sarah's heart sank, but she nodded. She had nowhere else to go. The first months were brutal. Sarah worked from before dawn until well past midnight. She scrubbed floors, washed linens, prepared meals for the traveling men who stayed at the boarding house, and endured Harold's growing unwanted attention. Her children helped as much as they could, but Emma's hands grew raw from washing dishes, and William's small frame struggled to carry firewood. It was during this dark time that Thomas Reed first walked into her life. He came through the door of the boarding house one autumn evening, a tall man with broad shoulders and sun-weathered skin. His dark hair was streaked with early gray at the temples, and his blue eyes held a quiet sadness that Sarah recognized immediately. It was the look of someone who had known loss. Thomas owned a large cattle ranch 15 miles outside of town. He came to Hollow Creek once a month for supplies and always stayed at the boarding house overnight. From the first moment, he saw Sarah carrying a heavy tray of food to the dining room. Something stirred in his chest that he had not felt in the 5 years since his wife had died, giving birth to a child who did not survive. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat as she set down plates of stew before the guests. Sarah barely glanced at him. She had learned to avoid the eyes of men at the boarding house. Most of them saw a young widow and thought she was available for more than just serving meals. But Thomas was different. He watched her work with concern rather than hunger. He noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the way she winced when Harold shouted at her from across the room, the gentle way she spoke to her children when she tucked them into their small bed in the attic. Over the following months, Thomas found more and more reasons to come to town. He needed supplies more frequently. He had business at the bank that required overnight stays. He wanted to check on a horse at the blacksmith that somehow was never ready when he expected. Each time he found small ways to help Sarah without making her feel like a charity case. He would carry in firewood when she was not looking. He would leave extra coins on his table after meals. He would bring small gifts for Emma and William, a carved wooden horse for the boy, ribbons for the girl's hair. "You don't have to do that," Sarah said one evening, finding him stacking wood by the kitchen door. Thomas straightened up, his face reddening slightly. "Do what, ma'am?" "Help me. You don't owe me anything." He met her eyes then, and Sarah felt something break open inside her chest. "Maybe I want to help," he said simply. "Maybe watching you work yourself to death while that man treats you like a servant makes me angry in ways I can't explain." Sarah looked down at her worn hands. "He's family. He took us in when we had nowhere to go. Family doesn't mean you accept cruelty, Thomas said. And from what I can see, he's getting far more from you than he's giving. That night, Sarah lay awake in the attic, listening to her children breathe, and thought about the rancher's kind eyes. She could not afford to think about such things. She was a widow with 2 children, no money and no prospects. Men did not want women like her. They wanted young, unmarried girls who came without burdens. Spring arrived, and with it came trouble. Harold had been drinking more heavily, and his attention toward Sarah had grown more aggressive. One night, he cornered her in the kitchen after the guests had gone to bed. "You've been here 6 months," he slurred, his breath hot against her face. "I think it's time you started showing some proper gratitude." Sarah's heart pounded as she pressed herself against the wall. "Please, Harold, I've worked hard. I've done everything you asked." "Not everything," he said, reaching for her. The kitchen door burst open. Thomas stood there, his frame filling the doorway, his eyes dark with fury. "Step away from her." Harold spun around, his face twisted with anger. "This is my house, Reed, my business, and she is under my protection now." Thomas's voice was steady but carried a warning that made Harold shrink back. "I suggest you go upstairs and sleep off whatever you've been drinking. We'll discuss this in the morning." After Harold stumbled away, Sarah collapsed against the counter, her whole body shaking. Thomas approached her slowly, carefully, the way one might approach a frightened animal. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly. She shook her head, but tears were streaming down her face. "I can't stay here anymore, but I have nowhere to go. My children—" "You have somewhere to go," Thomas said. "My ranch. I need a housekeeper. The pay is fair, the work is honest, and you and your children would have your own cabin. It's small, but it's warm and safe." Sarah looked up at him. "Why? Why would you do this for me?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Because 5 years ago, I lost everything that mattered to me. My wife, my child. I've been alone on that ranch, surrounded by cattle and cowboys, but completely alone. And then I met you, and for the first time in 5 years, I felt something other than emptiness." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "I'm not asking for anything in return," Thomas continued quickly. "I'm offering you a job, a home, safety for your children, that's all. Whatever else happens or doesn't happen is up to you." 3 days later, Sarah, Emma, and William climbed into Thomas's wagon and left Hollow Creek behind. The ranch was everything Thomas had promised and more. The small cabin had 2 rooms, a main living area with a kitchen and a small bedroom that Sarah gave to her children while she slept on a pallet by the fire. The work was hard but fair. She cooked for Thomas, and the ranch hands kept the main house clean and helped with lighter chores around the property. Her children blossomed in ways that broke Sarah's heart with joy. William followed Thomas everywhere, asking endless questions about horses and cattle. Thomas answered each one with patience, teaching the boy to ride, to care for animals, to be strong and gentle at the same time. Emma helped Sarah in the kitchen but spent her free hours reading books from Thomas's surprisingly large library. He had ordered them from back east, he explained, hoping to one day have a family to share them with. As the months passed, Sarah found herself falling in love with Thomas Reed. She loved the way he laughed at William's jokes. She loved how he listened seriously when Emma explained the plot of whatever book she was reading. She loved his quiet strength, his gentle hands, the way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching. But fear held her back. She had loved Robert deeply, and losing him had nearly destroyed her. She could not risk that pain again. More importantly, she could not risk her children's hearts. They had already lost one father. If things did not work out with Thomas, they would lose another. One evening in late summer, Thomas found Sarah sitting on the porch of her cabin, watching the sun set over the mountains. He sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. "I need to say something," he said, his voice rough. "And I need you to let me finish before you respond." Sarah's heart began to race, but she nodded. "I love you, Sarah Mitchell. I've loved you since that first night at the boarding house when you served me stew with hands that were raw from working and eyes that held more strength than any person I've ever met. I love your kindness, your courage, your devotion to your children. I love Emma's curiosity and William's joy. I want to spend the rest of my life with all of you." He turned to face her, his blue eyes shining with unshed tears. "I'm asking you to marry me. I'm asking you to let me be a husband to you and a father to your children. I'm asking you to let me love all three of you for as long as I live." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Her whole body trembled with the weight of what he was offering. Love, security, family, everything she had dreamed of but never believed she could have again. But she had to be honest with him. "If you want to marry me," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face, "you have to accept my two children. Not just tolerate them, not just provide for them. Accept them as your own. Love them as your own. Be their father in every way that matters. Because they are my heart, Thomas. They are everything to me. And I will not marry any man who sees them as burdens or obligations." Thomas reached out and took her hands in his. His grip was warm and strong and sure. "Sarah, I fell in love with your children before I even admitted to myself that I was falling in love with you. William reminds me of the son I lost, the son I never got to know. And Emma has your strength, your fire, your beautiful heart. They are not burdens. They are gifts. Gifts I never thought I would be blessed enough to receive." He brought her hands to his lips and kissed them gently. "I want to adopt them legally if you'll allow it. I want them to carry my name. I want to teach William how to run this ranch so that one day it will be his. I want to see Emma grow into the remarkable woman she's destined to become. I want to be there for every birthday, every Christmas, every scraped knee and broken heart. I want to be their father. Please, Sarah, let me be their father." Sarah could no longer hold back the sobs that had been building in her chest. She threw herself into Thomas's arms, and he held her tight, stroking her hair, whispering words of love against her temple. "Yes," she cried. "Yes, I'll marry you." The wedding took place 3 weeks later on the front porch of the main house, with the ranch hands as witnesses, and Emma and William standing proudly beside their mother. Sarah wore a simple blue dress that Thomas had ordered specially from Denver, and in her hair, she wore wildflowers that her children had picked that morning. When the preacher asked Thomas if he would take Sarah as his wife, Thomas looked not at Sarah, but at Emma and William. "I take all three of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Today, I become a husband and a father, and I have never been more grateful for anything in my life." After the ceremony, Thomas knelt down before the children. From his pocket he withdrew 2 small objects, a delicate silver locket for Emma and a pocket watch that had belonged to Thomas's own father for William. "These are promises," he told them, "promises that I will always love you, always protect you, always be here for you. You are my children now, my son, my daughter, and nothing will ever change that." Emma threw her arms around Thomas's neck. William stood frozen for a moment, his small face working through emotions too big for his young heart. Then he whispered, "Can I call you Pa?" Thomas's composure finally broke. Tears streamed down his weathered face as he pulled both children into his arms. "I would be honored," he choked out. "I would be so honored." Sarah watched her new husband hold her children, their children now, and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt hope. Real, solid, unshakable hope. That night, after the children were asleep in their new room in the main house, Sarah and Thomas stood on the porch watching stars emerge across the vast Wyoming sky. "Thank you," Sarah whispered. Thomas pulled her close against his side. "For what?" "For seeing you. All 3 of us. for wanting all three of us. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. You three saved me, Sarah. I was dying alone on this ranch, surrounded by ghosts and regrets. You brought me back to life. You gave me a family again. You gave me a reason to wake up in the morning and a reason to come home at night. I should be thanking you. Sarah turned in his arms and looked up at the man who was now her husband, the man who had accepted her children without hesitation, who had loved them before she had even allowed herself to hope for such a thing. I love you, Thomas Reed, and I love you, Sarah Reed. He smiled, and in that smile, Sarah saw their future. Years of laughter and hard work, of watching their children grow, of building something beautiful and lasting together. The past had been difficult. She had known loss and fear and loneliness, but standing there in her husband's arms, with her children safe and sleeping nearby, Sarah knew that the future was bright. She had found a man who understood that loving her meant loving the family she came with. She had found a home where her children could thrive. She had found love, real, deep, unconditional love. And as Thomas led her inside their home, Sarah Mitchell Reed knew that she would never be alone again. The Wyoming wind still blew cold across the prairie, and life on the ranch was never easy. But within the walls of that house, there was warmth, there was love, and there was a family that nothing company. Old, break apart. They had found each other against all odds, and they would hold on to each other for the rest of their days.